Hello everyone, it's Angie here at Beads and Plenty More. Today I thought I'd show you a Beadloom project because I haven't done one for a while. And this is just a basic bracelet. I am using these 2-hole tile beads just to change it up a little bit. So let's get started here with the Beadloom. So I've got the small Beadloom that I'm working on today. I think it will fit the camera better, but it does mean that I have to adjust my ends a little bit because I need to roll around the ends. So when I'm threading this up, I'm going to make sure that my ends have allow me to add a little extra thread on. And I will post a supply list at the end with the entire list of supplies, but I'll talk about them as I come to them and as I use them. So I'm working with this Miyuki thread. You could also use nylon beading thread. This is a nylon beading thread. Or you can also use Fireline. Fireline works really well on this. And as far as getting started threading the loom, I'm just going to tie my thread onto the end here. Bead looms come in 2 different sizes. As I said, I was using the small one here just because I think it'll fit the camera better and give you a chance to see the whole project more so. I often work on the larger loom just because I don't have to worry so much about making sure I've got enough thread. So I'm going to come around the bottom side of that and across my loom, maybe match that into more of the middle area, and around the hook on the other side. So I'm going around the bar and into the hook on the other side. Then I'm going to come back across the loom. Now I'm thinking that I'm leaving my spacing wide enough for this tile bead. So as you can see, it's wider than you might normally leave it for a bead loom project. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to come around the hook on the end here. We're going to go across one more time. So this one doesn't actually have a lot of warp threads on it, just because we do have these beads that are larger that mean that you're not putting as much thread on the loom. This is a great beginner project for someone that just wants to try something to start out with. So I've just cut the end of the thread here, and I'm just going to bring it around the hook on the other end. And I usually just tie my 2 ends together. This works when you have an even count of threads, warp threads across your loom. If you have an odd count, you're going to have to tie the other end to the other spoke on the other side. So we'll just tie it in tight. So then I kind of want to make sure that the warp threads are all kind of at the same tension. I maybe should have done that before I tied my knot, but I was pretty confident I had them, and so I didn't mention that sooner. You want to make sure they're all kind of at the same tension because you want your bracelet to sit evenly. So then, now that I've got this on there, I am going to coil. Maybe we'll go this way. Undo this one a little bit, and I'm going to pull more of the thread to this end. So we're going to work starting on this end and across there, and as I need more thread on this far end, I'm going to roll the rollers a little bit more this way towards my work, allowing me to add a little more thread into my work. So basically we will end up at some point rolling over the wire spring here to add a little more thread. So as far as getting started, I've got a needle threaded with some more of the Miyuki cording here, and I am just going to tie it to my outside thread here. So whatever knot will hold it in place. You can come back with a little bit of glue later and glue this in place to even make it more secure. Tie one more for good measure. And then I'm ready to start beading. Now, on my finished project here, I'm going to use these slide ends, which are these ones right here. And I've got these sitting over here. Now, the one thing about these slide ends is I found that they didn't fit the size 8 seed beads, which is the beads we're using for the project, very well. So what I did is I used a bunch of size 10 seed beads on my first row. So I'm going to pick up 12 of the size 10. Now, this doesn't matter what color these are. They can be any color in the world because they're going to get hidden by that slide end. So I've got my 12 seed beads on, and what I'm doing is my thread is on the left-hand side. I'm going to come under the loom, under all my warp threads here. Not under the entire loom, sorry. Under the warp threads is what I meant to say. And I'm going to separate between my threads here. So I only have 11 beads on there. I will add one more bead. So basically when I pull this up, I should have four beads between each of the warp threads. Okay, so you can see I've got my finger under here holding everything up. Now I've come under my warp threads. When I come stitch back the other way, I need to go over top of my warp threads. So when I get to the point where I'm going over a thread, I want to make sure that I'm definitely going over that thread. And that's the trick to getting the beads to stay in place. So when I pull the needle out here and pull the extra thread, and there's my first row. So this is the row that's going to get hidden again by that slide end. So it's, as such, it's just a base row. I'm going to just see if I can get rid of this tail end here because it's in the way. Maybe just slip it under the warp threads for now. There we go. It's out of the way now. So now I'm ready to start with my beads. So these tile beads, I have a 7-inch bracelet with this one here. And I used 38 of the tile beads in the entire bracelet. I might, for myself, go a little bit longer and make it 7.5, but that would just mean having a few extra beads. So I'm going to add 1 tile bead, 3 of the size 8 seed beads, and 1 more tile bead here. Again, I'm going to bring that from the left-hand side under my warp threads here. Set everything up through the warp threads. So I've got the 3 size 8 beads in the middle of my warp threads here and the tile beads on each end. And I'm just going to come back. So now the second part of this, to go through the second hole of the tile bead, I already have the tile bead in place. So I'm going to come through it. I'm going to add my 3 seed beads here. And you might find that putting your seed bead piles in the middle of your bead loom is actually easier than having them off to the side like this. And then I'm going to come through the other tile bead. So I'll pull everything up tight. So I've got my finger under it to hold everything up. And I'm just coming back through. So if you pull this tight and you discover that the beads are sitting down or something, it means that you just didn't go through on top. You ended up going underneath a thread again. And all you need to do is just go back and stitch back underneath again and then back across the top again to just secure it back into place. So this time I'm going to swap it out because we're creating something of a checkerboard pattern here. So I've got, in this case, I've got the size 8 beads on the outside ones. So 3 size 8 beads, my tile bead, and then 3 more size 8 beads. And this time I need to just pick up the size 8 beads, catch the center hole of the, or the second hole of the center tile bead, and then 3 more of the 8s. So I'll continue to work this up until I can get closer to the other end. If you need to add another thread, all you do is tie it to the outside edge. Leave your tail ends long enough that you can weave them into your work later, because it's easier to thread a longer tail end and with the needle and just weave it into the work than it is to thread a short tail end and get it into a row or two of your work. And I'll catch you on the other side. So I know I said I would show you how to do the clasp next, but I do want to jump in and show you a mistake I made and how to fix it, because it's a mistake that a lot of beginners make. And this is a case where I missed one of the beads, so you can see this bead is flopping around here. It's because I didn't go on the top side of my string when I went back the other way. I stitched the bottom side, and then when I went to do the top side, I didn't come around the end and over the top string. So the easy way to fix that is just really to come underneath all my strings again. So I'm going to come from the left-hand side across my row again. And this time I'm actually pushing down to make sure that I'm going underneath my string. So there, I've caught it underneath. So now coming back, I want to make sure I'm on top of my string this time, on top of those warp threads, and it'll just secure it into place. So now when I push on it, it's not dropping down the way it was before. So the other thing I want to show you is I've added some thread here. So I just tied it to the outside edge and kept going. One thing I like to do is I like to keep an easy eye needle nearby, because I can just thread it up and get rid of my tail end right away. So to get rid of that tail end, all I'm going to do is I'm going to come back through a few of my rows and just hide it in there, because you never want to cut right next to a knot. So you don't have to worry about the ups and downs, you're just really stitching through the beads to hide the thread. So you don't have to be over top of the warp threads, you don't have to be under the warp threads, you're just hiding your thread. And I usually go 2 or 3 rows back, and at that point it's woven in enough that I can just take my needle off and trim any extra. And then it's not getting in my way as I continue to work on my bracelet. So this time when I come back, I will show you how to do the ends. So here I am at the other end. I've added my row of size 10 seed beads, my red ones. And I just wanted to show you this before I took it off the loom, because I wanted to show you what I meant by having to roll over the spiral end of the loom. So now we're just going to loosen everything off to get it off the loom. I'm going to have to cut on this side because I did tie it to the... There we are, got it off the loom. I'm just going to set the loom aside, and then we'll start talking about how to put the ends on. So I'm just going to cut it so I've got all these little tail ends loose. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to weave the tail ends over a bit. So I'm hooking my needle on, and I'm just going to take them over a couple beads. Because what I want to do is I want to tie them to each other. So take this one over 4 beads. And I did find that it was better to tie around a bead than to actually tie the 2 ends together. I found that I got my knot to sit a lot nicer. So I'm going to take this one and I'll move it over a bead. So that puts those two kind of in a spot where I can tie them together. So I've got a few knots there. I'm going to trim those shorter so that I know that I've still got these two ends to do. So the slide end that I picked up is a 20mm slide end. It fits this particular project quite well. We do have them shorter and we have them longer as well. So same deal, we'll cut those off. And I'm just going to add a little bit of glue to these. So I've got the GS Hypo Cement here. You could also use E6000 to do this. Just enough on the knots. And I might even go down the bracelet and catch the knots from where I added thread as well. So I'm just finishing the one end off here with you. You'll want to do the same thing on the other end. Okay, so the slide end just goes over our row of size 10 seed beads. So everything just inserts into that end. I left the tails a little bit long, they're sticking out, but I can trim them. So, trick that I have for getting these slide ends to close, set them up on their tail end, or on their end, and then just use something flat to bend over the other end. So I'm using the outside of my pliers actually. And there you go, there's your end on. So you do the same thing on the other end, and then you add your clasp in with a few jump rings or a split ring to finish it off. So I hope you enjoyed that. Have a good day.